Welcome to another virtual author chat at the Poison Pen Bookstore. I'm Sean Charles, and today the Poison Pen is honored to have with us two award-winning writers and actors and costumers, Marjorie McCown and John Lindstrom. Marjorie's new book is Starstruck, and John's debut novel is Hollywood Hustle. The Poison Pen does have copies of both books available. For those tuning in who'd like one, just give us a call or go online to the Poison Pen Bookstore. I would like to welcome Marjorie and John.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you
Delighted
for
to be here.
thank you for joining us again. My first question for both of you is, authors don't appear out of nowhere like Athena from the Head of Zeus. They all kind of have their own backstory, which sometimes is just as fascinating as the books they write. So I'd like you to tell us as much as you'd like, a little bit about yourself before you became published authors. And we'll start with you, Marjorie.
Well, I started out as a costume designer for theater and opera in New York City. And then when I decided I wanted to concentrate on film, I moved to Los Angeles because if I was going to do film, I wanted to do it where they invented it.
Mhm.
So I came out to Los Angeles, and I was very, very fortunate to land a job within 2 weeks of landing in the city on the first Addams Family
Oh,
as the assistant costume designer. And I spent the next 27 years working as a costume designer, assistant costume designer, key costumer, and feature films. So that's me. And then when I retired from film in 2017, I'd always been interested in writing, had always written as a creative outlet for myself, but I decided to concentrate on the craft of writing and just see how far I could develop that.
what about you, John? You have an award-winning career behind you. Did you always want to get into the arts?
I did, but unlike Marjorie, it took me a little longer than 2 weeks. I grew up I was born and raised in Southern Oregon, and where I grew up, at the time, it's not so much now, but at the time it was almost agrarian. There was a lot of agriculture, cattle ranches, plywood mills, but 10 miles away was Ashland, Oregon, where we had the very first Shakespearean theater in the country, being the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. My parents used to take me over to that, and there were two movie theaters in town. And so I got hooked on movies pretty young, and at about the age of 5, I think. And so I always wanted to have a career in entertainment. And when the time came, I left the University of Oregon and I moved to Los Angeles. I started studying acting. I've studied with Lee Strasberg and other coaches and whatnot. But eventually I was able to cobble together an acting career. And it has been very, very good to me. And it's been a great ride. But I always wanted to write. And I started that in college, trying my hand at just descriptive things, trying to describe the wet oak trees in Eugene, Oregon, things like that. And then, of course, as pretty much anybody in Hollywood, Marjorie can attest to this, everybody and their dog has a screenplay. And I was no different. I wrote my first screenplay after trying to write it as a novel.
Oh,
And I realized I was way in over my head. I got about 50 pages in, and I just said, this is terrible. But I know how to write a script because I've read 1,000 of them. So I wrote a script, and that actually got made after a few years of trying. Yeah, it was called The Hard Easy with Bruce Dern, Vera Farmiga, and Peter Weller.
Good
And
Lord.
yeah, it attracted good talent. I don't know where you can find the movie now, but and I've since written another and directed that. But I really wanted to, after kind of being beat up in the development process, I really wanted to write something that I could just do on my own and not have anybody try to tell me that the inciting event has to happen on page 17 when it doesn't. Which we all know isn't true. So So that's how I came to writing Hollywood Hustle. I just got up one morning and started writing. Winston Green woke up and his granddaughter was in his bedroom in his mountain home. And I just went from there.
What was the path to publication like for Hollywood Hustle?
It was, I think it was relatively smooth, comparatively speaking, because I still know a lot of people who are really trying to get their first books off the ground, and you know, and they might have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 books written. I think it made it easier for me, one, because I have worked in Hollywood for a long time, and so I had a edge of authenticity to it. I also am a fairly recognizable actor. I have, a social media following. I have, fans, and they're incredibly supportive. So, but the actual path began when I was narrating audiobooks, and I wound up narrating several by very, very good authors like Blake Crouch, Don Winslow, and specifically Alex Finlay. And I've told this story a lot. Alex has since become a very good friend, and Anthony is his name. Alex is a nom de plume, but he's the first one who told me, if you're serious, you have to go to the book conferences. And if you're going to do that, you have to go to Thriller Fest. That's where you're going to find an agent. That's where you can pitch your book. You can, everything happens there. There are certainly other very valuable conferences like BoucherCon and Left Coast Crime and all that. But he said, but Thriller Fest is the biggest, and that's where you should begin. And that's where I found my agent, the wonderful Liza Fleisig of Liza Royce Agency. And within a few months, Liza had a few offers coming down the pike, and we settled with Crooked Lane. So, it was a years long journey for me from what I would call fade in, to actual publication last February. But I think my publication journey was relatively smooth. And it's been really enjoyable. I mean, I do love the publishing community, the book writing community. It's so much more egalitarian and helpful and inclusive than anything I've ever been involved in.
It's wonderful. Marjorie, if I remember correctly, when you started writing, you initially resisted doing something set in Hollywood. You wanted something different.
I did. I thought that I was too close to the business to render it with any objectivity. And, but I wasn't convinced that at the outset that the behind the scenes would be as interesting to readers as, what they're used to seeing on the red carpet. So that took a bit of convincing on my literary agent's part. She's the one who really drove that decision. But I did. I listened to her because she's always right. I mean, and she kept telling me that that's what I needed to do. It's the old saw, write what you know. And certainly after 30 years of working behind the scenes, I knew that in a very granular way. And it is, I mean, I loved my career in design and film. And so I hope some of that comes through in the books, because I really love the work. I love the community. As John said, it's Hollywood can be tough, but when you are with your collaborators, your close coworkers, I found it to be a mostly very supportive environment. And certainly that's true of the writing community. And John is one of my heroes there. He made such a beautiful gesture when we were both at Left Coast Crime presenting his debut authors. He got up to do his presentation, and he took time out of his presentation to acknowledge me, which, what a gallant thing to do.
A good book is a good book.
Oh, well, sir. You're too kind. Anyway, I'm sort of wandering off the path, but yes, I mean, so there you go. I was convinced, I wrote it, and she was able to sell it in the first round when we went out to market. So again, hats off to Anne Collette. She's always right.
Yeah, listen to the pros. You know,
Exactly,
there's a
exactly.
reason they do what they do, and they do
Yep.
it well. So listen to them. Yeah.
Absolutely. Same with my editors, wonderful, wonderful editors.
Yeah.
Crooked Lane, fantastic publishers. I I couldn't ask for better.
No, me either. We are both with Crooked Lane, and I have to say the closest they ever get to saying change it is, hey, I just have a suggestion.
Yeah,
But you can always tell me to piss off, you know. I mean, nobody forces you to do anything. So,
yeah,
you know, they're more interested in keeping their authors happy because that's how they get better books.
right. Supportive and collaborative.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
Both of your books really introduce readers to different worlds in Hollywood. In your case, Marjorie, it's costume design. I had no idea that there were so many people involved in dressing, actors and actresses and things like that. It's a whole community. And your character, Joey, kind of uses her experience to help her in her sleuthing sidekick. Can you tell us a little bit about Starstruck?
Thank you. Yes. So, well, we always say that we could all be detectives as costume designers and costumers, because we're always looking about for sources, different vendors to make things better, make things more beautiful, make things less expensive, all kinds of sources. So that's just part of our gig. And yes, Joey finds herself caught up in these situations where there's somebody that she's personally involved, or a situation with which she's personally involved. In Final Cut, she stumbles over the body of a coworker on the set where they're shooting a movie, and she immediately becomes a suspect. So she's drawn into the murder investigation that way and uses her research skills and her sourcing skills to try and figure out what is actually happening with the investigation. And then in Starstruck, she's working on a movie and witnesses an accident that she realizes is tied to one of the stars of the movie. And because of that, and the fact that she also has a personal investment in the person who, well, she witnesses a hit and run near the set. She feels guilty because she was in a bodega and saw the victim being harassed by two men. And she, instead of inserting herself in the situation as she thought she should, when they told her to get out, she did. And then a few minutes later, this girl bursts out of the bodega and is run down in traffic. She realizes the car involved belongs to the leading lady in the movie. So even though the leading lady obviously wasn't driving, there's something there. And because she feels guilty that she didn't do anything to try and help this girl that might have prevented her from running into traffic, she's drawn to seek out answers to satisfy her own conscience and to figure out what's going on with this actress that she's working with.
Sean, in your compelling debut, you introduced readers to Winston Green. And what I found fascinating was there's a really kind of interesting mystery aspect, suspense thriller, but also we get glimpses of what it was like to be an actor. You're bringing your own experience, I think, into Winston's life. At one point, you talk about the 4 stages of an actor's career, and I just thought that was fascinating. What can you tell us about Winston and the book Hollywood Hustle?
Well, yes, Winston Green is certainly a composite of many people that I've known, including myself. Everybody in the book is, I've known some version of these people, right down to the psycho surfer. And you spend enough time in Hollywood and you meet all kinds. And Hollywood is like a big bright light, and it draws an awful lot of moths.
Oh.
And I will say that the journey of someone, and I can say this now because unfortunately he passed, but Tom Sizemore's career arc and life arc was one that was a big inspiration in terms of how things can go so right for someone, especially as gifted as Tom Sizemore, and then come crashing down so hard, because they just, these guys just can't keep their addictions at bay, or demons at bay. I do want to point out one thing. I don't know if Marjorie knows this, but one of my cousins was the costume designer Don Feld. He
You
was
told me that.
I
Yeah.
told you that. That's
He was
right. Yeah.
an
Don Feld was,
iconic figure.
he was a 4-time Academy Award nominated
Yeah.
costume designer. He had been started in the business as a teenager by Frank Sinatra. And his favorite line was colder than a wardrobe woman's heart. And I know. But when I was so tickled when I got to read Marjorie's book, Final Cut, because she really nailed the life of not only costume designers specifically, but the workaday people who you never hear about. I wanted to pull back the cover a little bit to show the life of the workaday actor, for sure, because I know that life very, very well. And I think that we tend to describe Hollywood stories that are about a Hollywood that even those of us in Hollywood don't really know. It's about a life that we don't live. I was having this conversation with a producer the other day who read my book, and this guy's produced like 200 movies. And he was like, my God, John, nobody ever talks about this stuff. I see, you're right. And that's, I think, why I wanted to write about this particular kind of story. I'm also a big lover of film noir, and I wanted Winston Green to step onto a path that, as noir would dictate, he knows might very well end in his own demise, but he does it anyway. Usually it's for a woman, but for him, it was for family. And I wanted to be able to tell that story, because I think there's also a great beauty in the people who commit to this career and still manage to have a very small, very tight circle of great friends and love their families endlessly.
I thought
People,
that
in other words, people. Sorry.
that came through. No, sorry for interrupting. I thought that came through so clearly. And Winston is such a heroic, flawed, but heroic, self-aware, intelligent, thoughtful, a big-hearted character that you can't help but become invested in what's going on with him. And although the action itself is compelling, it's because I think, it's presumptuous of me, but as a reader myself, I was so drawn to him and found him so relatable, and at the same time, so admirable that, I would have followed him any place on any story.
Well, that's truly, yeah, I'm honored to hear that. I think that I think there was something else that I wanted to say, because as far as, by way of Winston, you have to make it, in any artist has to be able to do this. I believe you've got to be able to look yourself in the mirror and be brutally honest with yourself and recognize where you went wrong. Maybe you fix it, maybe you don't. But I wanted Winston to be somebody who tried to fix the devastation that he left behind him simply because he couldn't stop drinking. How many times have we seen that? I mean, I don't have enough fingers and toes to count the people that I've known who have crashed and burned, and in most cases died because they couldn't pull it together. I mean, I'm the only one that I know from when I started out. I don't know about you, Marjorie, but I mean, I don't know anybody here that I knew when I was, say, bartending to make ends meet. They're all gone.
Wow.
Yeah, the attrition rate is really high.
I think actors are even more, literally under the spotlight, and there's an added pressure of, forgive me for saying it this way, but being the product that is in front of the cameras, the studios are selling. Yeah, we certainly have more than our fair share behind the scenes of people with addiction problems. And part of it is just the hours and the pressure and all of that, but we don't have the additional pressure of being in front of the camera, which I think is a very unique space that I can't imagine myself as long as I've never had any job that wasn't in the theater or in film. I've always worked in costume design, costumes. And so I've known literally tens of thousands of actors and singers and dancers. And that kind of pressure of being in the spotlight, I still can't imagine. And I have tremendous compassion and respect for anybody who is in that space and has to carry that on their shoulders.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, while I was touring the book, somebody asked me, gee, it seems like it's a really hard life. I said, Hollywood is hard and staying in is harder. It's a tough business. And, you're right, Marjorie, if you're out in front of the camera or on stage, it's even harder because now plus everybody's got a phone. They're all coming at you, like this. I mean, I saw Alec Baldwin ambushed in a coffee shop the other day going, say it, free Palestine. This is like, I think I got enough problems right now. I don't need to get into this one too. But oh gosh, there was something that you had said, Marjorie. I wanted to, oh, I remember. It was, I heard a story once when James Dean and Dennis Hopper were on the set of Giant. And James Dean was about to do his first scene with Elizabeth Taylor. And there's the big mansion behind them. And here's Dennis Hopper and James Dean. And then there's this just hundreds of extras out in front of them. And James Dean, just without a word, he got up and opened his fly and took a leak of all these people. And then he closes up, and Dennis Hopper, not exactly, a stranger to
no shrinking violet heat.
Yeah, he goes, what was that? And he goes, well, I figured if I could get up there and do that in front of all those people, I can handle doing a scene with Elizabeth Taylor.
Oh my.
Yeah,
wow.
He was so scared of working with Elizabeth Taylor that's what he did to get over it, was just to show, here I am.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's what we have to do. That's what we offer.
Yes. Yeah. And you have to look that relaxed on camera, no matter what's going, except in an action scene, but
terrified or not,
you're up there talking and it doesn't matter who else is on stage with you or what's going on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Before you both became published writers, you were in the storytelling business. Marjorie, you told stories through costumes, John through acting and directing and screenwriting. Did any of the skills you had in those careers transfer to your work as writers, help you as a writer?
John, do you want to take that?
Go with that? Sure. Yeah. In fact, I just gave my first seminar at the most recent Thriller Fest about just this. It was called How Acting Made Me a Better Writer. And I don't know how I let myself get talked into this, but I did it. There are all kinds of skills that I have learned as an actor that really have helped me to write, in order to help me translate something, to articulate it, to define it. One thing is, every time I sit down, like, when you sit down to write in the morning or whenever you do you ever go back and look at what you just wrote yesterday? I know I do. In acting, we call that's an incredibly important exercise. In acting, we call it the moment before. What happened right before this? That's how I get into the headspace. I think about, what's my moment before here? And especially if I'm speaking from the point of view of my main character, whose life I'm trying to show everyone anyway. Another example I used was looking for the window into a character. And I used a line from The Silence of the Lambs. Anthony Hopkins is well known for just reading scripts over and over and over and over again, and to let it absorb in. And I'm sure he looks at his role more than other roles, and I'm sure he's memorizing as he goes, but he's taking it all in. And there's a line in that movie, which for me, I know as an actor, he saw that and went, that is the definition of Hannibal Lecter. And the line is, Dr. Chilton holds up a photograph, which we don't see, to Clarice and says, he did this to her. His pulse never got above 85, even when he ate her tongue. Now that, to me, tells me everything that I need to know as an actor on how to play that role. And you notice Anthony Hopkins' eyes never get excited in that performance. I mean, it's truly iconic, but his eyes stay dead as a doornail through all of it, even with the, the nice Chianti line and all that stuff. So I'm always kind of looking as I'm writing for those windows. That window into a character, whether that character's in the scene or not. I'm looking for something that I can find that can articulate for the reader who that person really is at their core. So that would be probably my basic best benefits from acting.
Marjorie, what about costume design? How does that translate into telling a story?
Well, costume, I've said this a lot, but it remains true. Costume design is really about telling stories with clothing, which is what makes us different from fashion designers. But our job is to first support the characters, to help work with the actors, to find the costume pieces and the look that will help them inhabit that character, and also in turn also support the story. So everything that we do is in service of first the character, and then the world of the movie and the story that we're telling on that movie. And each movie is a different world unto itself, even if whatever it is, if it's a modern thriller, if it's a period piece, if it's a fantasy, it's a world that we're creating together, and everything needs to be integrated into that world properly in order to make it believable. So the better we do our jobs, the better story that's told, even if it's in something that in fact, it's better often if the audience doesn't even notice the costumes, because then they are just automatic, they have accepted them as part of this world and accepted the world. So that's the primary way that costuming has helped me be a better writer. Also, as John was talking about, I've read hundreds, probably thousands of screenplays, and just seeing the craft of writing a screenplay, which is different from a novel. But some of the screenwriters that I've worked with, John Sayles, who wrote the screenplay for Apollo 13, Eric Roth, who wrote the screenplays for Forrest Gump and The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. When I read those screenplays, it was just, I had to consciously I had to concentrate on my work, because I was so drawn into the stories of those screenplays that I didn't want to be distracted by having to break down for a costume plot. And the way those writers, what they do with pace and structure, has just been so instructive for me. And I noticed it consciously when I was working, but now that I've transitioned to writing as my major craft, they inform me every day.
That's I'm glad you mentioned that, actually, because there's writers like Sayles and and Robert Towne and Quentin
Oh my
Tarantino,
goodness.
and they used to say about Robert Towne that when he would write a page or even do a rewrite, because he did a lot of ghost writing, like all those people you mentioned do as well. They said it felt like he left hot breath on the page.
Ah,
Felt so organic, and what those guys did. I do want to point out something I think this is really evident in Marjorie's writing, and something that I had to learn, because actors are really only responsible for telling one story, and that's the character that you're playing. Whereas Marjorie and a writer, and I think why it's so smart that someone like Anthony Hopkins reads the entire script over and over and over again, a writer has to care about all the characters. A costume designer has to care about everybody in the script. They got to tell all those stories. And I really had to readjust, and go, okay, I need to deepen these secondary people here, and even cut some, because now they're so thin and they don't even belong here, which I did.
When both of you decided to go down the path towards writing a book, you could have chosen a number of different genres: fantasy, science fiction, romance, historical novels. Why did you decide you wanted to write mysteries? What about mystery appealed to you as a writer?
well, mysteries are what I read. I mean, that's my go-to genre. And I like all kinds of mysteries. I love cozies, I love thrillers, I love noir, I love romantic suspense, anything with a puzzle, anything mysterious, I'm in. And I've been a big fan all my life, but especially when I was working in film, I switched so that I was only reading murder mysteries, because they really helped me disengage from the workday. I could get so involved in the mystery that I could forget about the work for, however long I was at home, whether it be 3 hours or 12 hours. I mean, when you're working on a film, and I know John has the same experience, that becomes your life. That is your life, and you're completely absorbed by that environment, which is great, which is part of the beautiful part of the job. But sometimes you need to find some way to step away, and reading a murder mystery is one way I could step away from the work.
Gosh, I think why to choose it? I mean, yes, I love crime. Elmore Leonard was always really one of my heroes, and so was Ian Fleming, for that matter. But I think, I wanted to write something that had some edge to it and some hard hitting to it, and a satisfying body count, as my friend Castle Freeman says. But I also think that it took the course that it did, because sometimes you don't realize the size of the chip that's grown on your shoulder from whatever your experience is. For me, it was, having to survive in Hollywood, and it's not easy. And, as I said, there's probably 3 people in the world that I can count on as my really close friends, and I've known thousands of people here. So I think, I joke, I mean, it's not really a series except for the world that I'm writing about, but I sometimes wonder if I'm trying to kill Hollywood one book at a time.
Hmm.
Well, it does take, you cannot survive in Hollywood without developing a thick skin, that's for sure. And also, you alluded to this earlier, John, just finding a way to ground yourself, so that, and maybe that becomes resilience, because you have to be sure of who you are in order to navigate that world. It's a very complicated world, and people will always be trying to tell you what you should be doing or who you should be. And I'm sure that's even more true for an actor, but you have to be able to chart your own path and stick with it to a certain extent in order to have any kind of longevity.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's very true. I mean, yeah, there are so many people trying to tell you who to be and what to be and how to,
Yes.
you know, and I think, you know, for Winston Green, certainly at one point I describe him, that a director had described Winston as a landmine that's been stepped on, just waiting for you to step off. And I think that there's, you know, there's a great, you know, especially with the really great actors, and we can say Tom Sizemore, you know, he was not a big guy. He had a big head, but he wasn't a big guy. But I tell you, he just had this sense that you just don't mess with this man. And that, you know, even Al Pacino, I mean, he's what, 5'4"? But you don't mess with Al, even in his 80s. You know, you know, there's something about those lead people. I would never, ever mouth off to Meryl Streep. I think she would kick my ass. Or Nicole Kidman for that matter. There's a well in there of fierce survival and excellence and strive and dedication and drive that you just don't get in the way. Stay out of its way.
And yet a lot of people like you, John, like Tom Hanks, like Ron Howard, managed to navigate that and still maintain a sense of personal grace and compassion with their collaborators. I mean, I've never worked with you, but I don't get the sense that you're a trouble to work with on set. And certainly those gentlemen I mentioned are just come to work and are delightful every day and hardworking and very determined.
Yeah, yeah. There's always the goal of, you know, let's try and do this the best we possibly can. And by the way, this really beats the shit out of working for a living. So, you know, don't bring some gratitude with you for the enormous gift of being able to do this for a living. Then you don't belong here. You know, you don't deserve it.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's that push pull because as you say, it's a tough world, but yeah, we're so lucky to do it, to be able to have a part. I'm not an actor, obviously, but have a part of that world and be able to do work that satisfies us every day, even when it's difficult.
Yeah.
And with writing, I mean, what a gift to be able to get
Yeah,
up.
I'm not acting. I can go
Yeah.
write. So, you know, it's great. I can do something I love every day.
Yeah.
I mean, what a
Yeah.
gift.
It's truly a gift, truly a gift. And I try and remember that every day when I get up, how no matter what the problems are with the rest, you know, it's just to be grateful that we have this opportunity.
Yeah, that's really important.
How do both of you approach writing your books? Do you have a certain structure to your schedule? Do you always know in advance this is what I'm going to be doing? Or are you like the few authors that just hope the muse visits you and gives you
Well,
something?
yeah. Marjorie.
No, Muse, I've never, not for me anyway. I view writing, the process of writing very much like I did my work in film because that's how I learned to work. And I've brought that same process and adapted it for writing it. I believe that, and I do like structure. I mean, that's something that I enjoy. So I'm a big outliner. I do inspiration boards with images, just like we did for costume design. That's why I start out. And then I do an outline and then I sit down and write because it's like if you show up on set, you don't wait for the muse to say, oh, it's time to design costumes or it's time to fit these actors or it's time to do whatever. You get up and you do the work and the work itself inspires you. So I find if I get something down on the page, even if it isn't exactly if it isn't perfect the first time, and it never is, sometimes not the second or third time, but then I have something to work with. So work becomes the engine to get more work done. And once you're in the process, then you don't have to worry about writer's block or waiting for the muse because you're just doing it.
Yeah.
That's not very articulate, I guess, but that, I just get up and work.
yeah, no, I think that nails it. I'm with Marjorie. I have a schedule. I get up usually somewhere between 5:30 in the morning. And after I get a little meditation and coffee into me, I'm usually at the keyboard by 6:30 at the latest. When I'm writing, I try to do that every day. And the beauty of that, the benefit of that for me is that it helps me get to, we were talking about how acting helped me. Um, going through just trying to get to that place of what I call the freedom of creation. As an actor, you want to have your lines so locked down, and I certainly will kind of spot the beats of the story that I have to mark, and so I can tell this character story. And so like that, I do a beat sheet. I don't do scene cards. I don't outline. I don't really do that. I know basically where the story is going, but I get to the freedom of creation by just getting up and doing it every day. Yeah, I don't wait for the muse to hit me. And one of the great joys for me of writing is when I sit down and I don't know where the day is going, that it just comes. And especially if it's a problem, like how am I going to kill this person, or how am I going to get the guy out of that, that pickle? And I don't, when I sat down, I had no idea how I was going to do it. And it comes the same way an emotion or a thought will hit you freely when you're acting in a scene. So I guess I'm always after the same thing. It's a really addictive feeling. And it's just when I cross that bridge and am able to do it, and you can't keep up with your fingers because it's coming so fast. To me, that's all the reward that I might ever need. I mean, it'd be nice to make some money at it, but if I never make a dime, I know I can get to that at least once a day, if only for a few seconds. But that's my style. I like to get up and I like to be done by 9 in the morning because that's about all the creativity I have in me.
Oh,
It's
wow.
okay. Walter Mosley says the same thing, so I'm going with Walter.
Everybody has their own process, and clearly yours works for you. So that's why I'm a
As
little
yours
bit
does.
slower. Well,
Yeah.
I'm a little bit slower, and I'm a little bit more of I'll get up and write for 3 or 4 hours in the morning, then I'll take a break. And when I'm writing, that's what I'm doing. That's and then I'll take a break and do whatever else I need to do, emails, correspondence, errands, whatever. And then I come back and try and do a light edit in the afternoon. Or if things are really going well, I'll continue writing for another 2 or 3 hours. So
Yeah, that usually doesn't happen to me unless I'm on a rewrite after a first draft. Then I can do that pretty much any time. But yeah, no, that initial thing, it's for some reason for me, it strikes in the morning and I just can't seem to make it happen in the afternoon. No, I take that back. Sometimes I have. When I was getting to the end of Hollywood Hustle, I actually rented a room at the LA Athletic Club because it was COVID. And so they weren't renting hotel rooms. Instead, they said, we can rent you like an office space. So I went down there for my last stretch. It was about 5 days, and all day, every day for the very end of the book, I was spending all day, every day writing. I would only break for lunch.
well, I don't know. Like I said, your process works for you. So if it's not broken,
Yeah.
I think that would be actually wonderful. Maybe I should try that, just see how it goes if I just write in the morning. And then anyway,
Yeah.
something to think about. Your
Yeah.
book certainly speaks for itself. So
Yeah. Well, our work speaks for itself.
Now that you
Get
both,
away from me, kid. Sorry, John, go ahead.
well, that's all right. I was going to say now that you both have books to your credit, Marjorie 2 and John 1, what have you learned that you wish someone had told you when you were first starting out as a writer? This is what you need to know, or this is the best tip I can give you.
well, I think people were telling me this, although I wasn't completely taking it in, how important it is to be as engaged and proactive and energetic about the marketing aspect
Yeah.
of publishing as you are about the writing part of it. I mean, it takes just as much time and energy to do that aspect. And I think it's eminently, it's probably always has been, but certainly eminently more important than it ever was before, because the marketplace is so much busier and noisier than it's ever been before, which is the good news in some ways. More voices are out there to be heard.
You know, I think I have to go with that. I mean, there was nothing that I needed to be told in terms of what it took to write, you know, because I've just been, you know, even with screenplays, you know, I used to have a house up in the mountains. I would go up there for a couple of weeks and bang out a screenplay or something. So I knew that, but I think what Marjorie just said about marketing, I didn't realize how similar it would be to basically selling product that comes out of Hollywood in terms of how things are required, you know, what genres they fall into, how do you identify audiences, how do you get it out there, and then yeah, lastly, my God, the demands that are on you that you have to do in order to you know, all the social media postings and, you know, and all that stuff, how involved you have to be in the success of your own book. Yeah, I wish I'd known that. I may not have done it.
Well,
No, I take
done a
that back. You
beautiful
know, we'll do it
job.
again. Book 2 comes out, I'll be right back there, you know, posting 5 times a day and making videos and trying to let people know that my book is out there.
Normally, we ask authors about their favorite books or books that have been important to you, and you have mentioned authors. But because you're both kind of so immersed in the world of movies and film, I would be interested to know if you have favorite films or movies that have been important to you.
You know, I don't know how much time do you have.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, for me, my all-time favorite film is From Here to Eternity. And it is because I happened to catch it one night late television when I was about 15 years old, probably in a bad mood or in a bad way, as 15-year-old kids can be. And I watched this impeccably well-made movie with Burt Lancaster and Deborah Carr and Montgomery Clift and Donna Reed and all these people, you know, right on the verge of the world blowing up into a world war. And it just had everything. And I don't think, though I had seen great movies, I don't think I was really aware of how well a movie could be made until I saw what Fred Zinnemann did with From Here to Eternity. Yeah, there's plenty of other movies. I mean, who doesn't love Casablanca and The Wizard of Oz and, you know, The Godfather and 2001. And, you know, like I say, I could go on and on and on, but that's kind of the short version.
Yeah. Well, yeah, again, how do you even choose? Since you mentioned Robert Towne, I just flashed, of course, on Chinatown, which is, I think, one of the great LA movies. And
Yeah,
it's,
I don't think,
as far as
I
I'm
don't know if
concerned,
there's a
it's a
better one.
perfect movie. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a better LA noir film than that.
Mm-mm.
I mean, it
Mm-mm.
just nails it every level.
And beautifully cast and beautifully directed.
Oh,
Of course,
Faye
obviously
Dunaway
beautifully written, and yes, right.
Yeah. You know, fun fact, they offered that part to Jane Fonda and she wound up turning it down.
Oh,
And
that's so interesting. I didn't know that. Oh,
yeah,
speaking of that, Clute. I love that movie.
great movie, which she did do instead of
Yeah.
China.
Which is how I happened to think of it. Thank you. No, but you know, I mean, in every genre, like you said, 2001, I'm really fond of The Last Samurai, which is a more recent movie. I mean, I just think that's it's such a beautiful movie, for one thing. And I just love that friendship between oh gosh, I can't remember the samurai's name now, but anyway, I just love the relationships in that movie, and of course, it's so beautiful to look at and a beautiful story. I mean, the way Tom Cruise's character has that arc from being, you know, this bigot and to being the advocate for the Japanese people. And anyway,
Yeah. You know, that is one thing that I think, you know, like From Here to Eternity, it took me to a world that only movies can take you to.
yes,
You know, nowadays it's limited series, you know, that's what everybody's talking about and wants to be a part of. But for me, that self-contained story that only a movie well made can do. Books do that too, open a window
yes.
to a world that we don't know, but it mostly lives in the imagination of the individual reader in slightly different ways or greatly different ways. But the movie, you know, that is a world that we all see at the same time in a theater, and at least I hope we continue to do that.
Right. And then, and occasionally, like while you were talking about that, I was thinking about The Age of Innocence, which is one of my favorite books by one of my favorite authors, Edith Wharton, but was rendered so beautifully by Scorsese in a movie, which, you know, isn't often the case with a great book, that a great movie will come from it, or in my opinion, a great movie. So
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
My next question, I'll leave up to you as to how much or how little you'd like to tell us, but is there something in the works from you for readers?
Yeah, I'm working on book two.
Okay.
I'm just past the most important plot point, which of course is a murder. And I'm I'm again, I've been told so many times that book two is the hardest book you'll ever write. I'm curious if Marjorie feels that way. And I can't say that they're wrong. It's been a slog, and it put up a fight. But I'm at the point now where I get up in the morning and I'm excited to get back to it, and I have fun while I'm sitting there writing it. It's a much different kind of book, but it's still holding me. It's interesting me. How
yeah.
about you, Marjorie? How was book two for you?
Book two turned out to be, even though it's the continuation of a series with many, certainly the same main character and many of the supporting characters, it turned into a very different book, just in terms of the focus of, it was more about relationships, I think, whereas Final Cut was about relationships, but it's more about the environment. And the story and the plot, I think. And I feel like, of course, how do you know, I try not to analyze my own work that way, but I think it was different in that way, that it was more focused on the relationships within the book. But yeah, no, I feel like, and I hope I felt this way in film, and I hope I continue to feel this way in writing, that as long as and I have so much to learn. I mean, I don't have any illusions that I don't have much to learn. But I just continue to be curious and look for ways to try and stretch myself and learn with every new thing that I write, whether it be a blog post or an article or a book or a short story, which I'm trying now for the first time. So yeah. Yeah, book two is different. Book two was just as much work, if not more, than book one, and a joyful experience still at the same time. Even when there are problems, like you said, when you have a pickle that you have to work your way out of.
Yeah.
That keeps it interesting.
Yeah, I think that's part of it, is that you know, I like you, I don't profess to know even close to everything about writing. I learn something every time I go to a conference and sit at a panel and
Oh, yes.
listen to people, you know, and I love it. I love being able to sit there and take a note that I know I'm going to take back with me to the hotel room and bang out the next morning on my laptop. And I like you, just wrote my first short story. I was invited to contribute one to an anthology called Hollywood Kills, and I I had no idea what I was going to write about, and then I thought, you know what, I had a stalker some years ago that I had to take to court, and And I thought, you know, I've never really dealt with that. And I do think that writing helps you kind of deal with things, put them into order or in your subconscious. And so I thought I'd write about that, and I did it in about a day and a half.
Must have been
I'm
terrifying.
still waiting for the edit to come back, so I don't know how it'll turn out.
As a former librarian, I do have a question for John. It's about the origins of your Ian Fleming collection.
um, gosh, oh, they're down in my downstairs office. I would pull them out for you right now. I still have. I shouldn't admit this in public, but I had a teacher in probably 8th or 9th grade, and he was an English teacher, and he said, if you're going to steal something, steal a book. And and this is after explaining how paperbacks were put together, and, you know, because he wanted people to stop tearing up all the paperbacks. He's like, it's just a bunch of paper with some cardboard and some glue, and that's all it holds it together, you know. And it's like, it's not I don't want you to read them. In fact, I think you should, and I want you to. And if you're going to steal something, steal a book. Well, I took that as permission. And the next thing I knew, I had collected the entire James Bond collection in paperback with a 5-finger discount from the local library. And I even got the James Bond dossier, which was so complete on Q&A kind of multiple choice stuff. I actually took a 100 question quiz in, I think it was in Playboy or something, you know, 100 multiple choice questions on James Bond. I got 99 right. So I hope that answers your questions.
That does. You're an expert.
And I still have those paperback books.
One last thing, because we're rapidly running out of time. Can you tell us how readers can learn more about you and your books, the social media platforms you're on? Marjorie, do you want to let us know first?
Yes, I'm on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and all of my social media links are on my website, which is marjoriemccown.com.
John?
Yeah, same. All my links are on my website, johnlindstrom.com. That's John with no H and Lindstrom with a D, not Lindstorm, as I've gotten a lot of my life. But johnlindstrom.com has all my socials, Instagram, X, still have trouble calling it that, and Facebook. I post virtually everything, the same stuff on all of them, and I try to remember to do it on YouTube. I would do it on TikTok, but I got kicked off. There's a whole video that you can find about how I got kicked off TikTok.
I saw it.
You saw it? Okay, yeah. And
very amusing.
Thank you. I also have a link tree that you can get to through my website as well.
Well, 60 minutes have never flown by more quickly. We've been very fortunate at the Poison Pen to have Marjorie and John here with us, sharing insight into their books and creative process. I would like to thank them both for taking time to join us today, and thank you for tuning into another author chat with the Poison Pen Bookstore.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. In case I lose you before I start clicking on things,